culture eat strategy for breakfast. And I've really taken that to heart because it doesn't matter if you can have $1 trillion strategy. If you're, or the best, most thoughtful strategy that it is, if you're in a group that the culture is toxic, the strategy is going to be worthless, right? So be mindful of who you're around, be mindful about the type of environments and conditions that you create, not only for your family, but also professionally.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. There are good networking groups and bad networking groups, and luckily for myself and my next guest, we are both members of the Human Gathering, and they matched us based on who knows what algorithmic characteristics. And as soon as I met Derrick Pledger, I was super excited that they did. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Annika. I'm so glad that the algorithm worked the way it did.
I know.
Sometimes technology works.
Yes, it does. And you are at the forefront of technology and digital. After doing many other things, you're an Army War veteran, you're a board member, you've written books. You do so much, Derrick, to give back to others and to teach what you've learned. So let's rewind a little bit and talk about your journey.
Like you just mentioned, I do so many things, and that is certainly true. But I will say service is always at the middle of everything I do ever since, I've been a kid. I've been working since I was 14 years old. And I think work ethic is really at the center of me. It's the center of my being. I grew up in a single parent household. My mom had 3 jobs when I was a kid. So I thought that was just normal until I was like 14 or 15 and, hanging out with friends. And I would notice that their parents would be off work at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, which I thought was totally odd because my mom worked her normal job for the government. She used to get off work at a Honda dealership for another 4 hours and then bartend at night. So I thought, having 3 jobs was just normal. So just working, outworking everyone in my space was just something that came natural to me. And I think that sort of transcended, school, athletics, and all those things. And that's really at the center of who I am, working to drive toward outcomes. And I'm just happy to be here and looking forward to how we're going to dive in and create some firestorm here.
Yeah. What was that first job at 14?
First job was a busboy at a place called Promenade. And I remember it super vividly because I only made $2.13 an hour. So when I used to tell my friends that, they used to make fun of me, but they didn't understand that even though it was $2.13 an hour, at the end of the night, I used to get tipped out, as they call it, from all the servers. So even though, being 14 years old, 9th grade, every day that you work, you're coming home with about $30. That's a big deal in 9th grade, right? So it used to allow me to do some of the things, buy clothes. And at that time, who knows what we were wearing? Tommy Hilfiger, Nautica, things like that, Polo. So I had a pretty decent wardrobe for a 14-year-old guy that cleaned tables for a living.
Yeah. Well, it's evident why you would start working so early because you had that drive, but you also had that role model of work hard to get where you want to go. So what propelled you to decide, you're 14, you're working, you're making some money, to go into the military, to go to university? Were you the first person in your family to go to university? Did your family have a history of education? Did they have a history of service?
So a couple of things, I'll unpack each of those elements. Well, my dad was in the Air Force, so I knew very young that I wanted to demonstrate that I was tougher than him. So that's why I joined the Army. So that was the Air Force, Army side of it. And, joining the Army was one of the best decisions I made in life. But I will tell you how I got to the Army certainly was not linear. I went to Virginia Tech undergrad. And after I graduated from college, I moved to D.C. with a couple of my fraternity brothers. And the same things that we were doing in college, we were doing in D.C. Let's just say that. We can save that story for another time. And one day I woke up and just realized that, if I don't do something now or change something, I'm going to be in the same position 10 years from now. So one Saturday morning, after a long night of partying and booze and all the other stuff that, 23-year-old kids do, I went to the recruiting station at 9 a.m. in the morning, took the ASVAB test. I felt a little hungover, a headache. I took the test, and 3 weeks later, I was gone. So it was radical change, but I felt like in life, radical change is something that works for me. And I can get into some other radical changes that I've made within my career that really has set the tone for me to get to where I am today.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. I love that concept and that thought of you really have to shake things up in life to make things
Yeah.
happen.
And it takes courage, right? We talked about work ethic, but I think one of the things, even if you have a phenomenal work ethic, if you don't have the courage to just take that step or to start, that can be self-sabotaging to yourself, right? That can destabilize yourself if you're not going to have enough courage to be able to go do so. After out of the Army, unfortunately, I got injured in 2008 during the line of duty. So it was sort of a gift and a curse. I would have definitely stayed in the Army for, 20 years plus, but I had an opportunity to either sit at a desk or in the Army or get out. So I chose to take the medical retirement. So after that, I worked at the FBI for about 18 months. And I come from a long line of civil servants. My mom worked in the government, grandmother worked in the government. Like service is just kind of what we do. And after, almost 2 years at the FBI, one Friday, I just recognized that I couldn't sit in this chair for another 30 years. Like, I'm just not going to do this. So radical change. You see a theme here? I quit. So I handed in all my stuff that day and I quit. I ejected properly. I thanked my unit chief, phenomenal woman. Her name is Dee Lewis, and said, this is just not for me. I'm going to go. I'm going to figure something out. But I didn't have anything figured out. So when I told my mom that I was leaving the FBI, she was like, oh my God, you're nuts. Why would you do that? All right, your career is set, yada, yada. And I really didn't have a plan. So during that weekend, I forced myself to do some real introspection, some real soul searching, and called a friend of mine that I had previously worked in Iraq with. He was a guy that trained folks on how to use different intelligence systems while in Iraq. And I said, hey, man, just quit my job. Do you have anything open in us? And he said, yeah, man, if you want to go back to Iraq and teach folks how to use systems. And for me, being back in Iraq was something I would love to do. So again, a few days later, I was in Iraq again, but as a contractor, I wasn't in uniform, but I was still hanging out in military units, teaching them how to do, VMware sort of system administrator type stuff, scripting. And that's where I learned that's really how I, started to get a bit more technical, because I had to teach myself how to code, teach myself how to be a system administrator. I was doing cool things with full motion video. And that was really my on-ramp to getting digital. Again, there was radical change. So it's that company that I joined. It was a company called SCAC at the time, which I was with for 14 years. There were some acquisitions. The company turned into another company called Lido. So I was there for 14 years. So I started as a field service engineer and ended up being the chief information officer 13 years later. So it was not linear. I did a lot of things. Program manager, ran business, ran P&L, profit and loss. I was a chief architect, chief engineer, chief solution architect, doing a lot of tech nerdy type of things. And then when cloud came out, I leaned in very early on cloud. So I had some pretty cool things that I was able to do first, just because, that work ethic, again, it just keeps coming back around. So when folks were saying, hey, what is this cloud thing? I recognized that this was going to be something big in 2014, 2015. And I kind of rode the cloud into it bigger and better things. And now 11 months ago, I joined a company called Maximus as a chief digital and information officer, because all things are digital to me. And I wanted to make sure I continued to stay ahead of that curve. And the company I would previously work for was all about really putting as much capability in the hands of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, while my company now it's about service, it's about making sure that veterans have access to their medical care, making sure global citizenry can get enrolled and benefit. So I really love that mission, because it's about service. It's about making sure that you democratize healthcare in a way that you can do it with dignity and don't make people feel bad about enrolling in healthcare, or if they have an unfortunate financial circumstance. It still means that everyone in this country should have access to healthcare. So I'm really glad that we're at the forefront of that. But I also still get to touch the Army and the Air Force and some of those other missions. So again, the critical theme is just service, right? And I love to work. I love to help, because I recognized early on that it's not just about me. You have to have a pursuit that's a bit more worthwhile than yourself. And I think that I learned that early on.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. Just from service, government service, not only your work ethic and this family history, but also you clearly have an intellectual curiosity of wanting to learn about the world around you. And that's why you've taken the chance, why you've taken the risk so many times, whether it's you didn't have a safety net, but you knew there was something else. And guess what? There was something else. and just continuing this road and trying all these different things. I love stories like that because I'm a lot like that too.
I know we've talked about it, and you're like that too. You can do 1,000 things, Annika. I know that very well.
But
Right.
it's really great to see it. It's not that we're doing all these different things because we're, fly by night or whatever, construct people might want to think about that. It's because we absolutely have this curiosity, and we also see how all the things that we're doing are the next link to the next thing we're doing, the next conversation we're going to have, to bringing all of this together.
Yeah, I agree with that. You hit on a very salient point, and I want to double click on it, right? I've had conversations in my lifetime with family members and friends alike where they say, hey, why don't you just stick with thing, right? Like, why do you have to do, like, you want to write books, you're an engineer. Why can't you just focus and go deep on something? And I think that in and of itself, in my view, is something I wrote about in the second book. It's around social sabotage and allowing their opinions to dictate what your behaviors are, which is like the craziest thing in the world, right? A lot of times we don't do something because we lack the courage out of fear what other people are going to say or fear of being judged by others. But if you have, like you talked about, the intellectual curiosity to learn something, or you want to become a person that is successful at X, I don't think the opinions of others should be impacting that, right? But that takes courage, right? That takes a level of courage and internal fortitude that not many of us have because we're so inundated every single day with different messages or worried about being judged and what are people saying about me at the water cooler. And that's just something that I've never had those handcuffs, right? So one of the reasons I write about that is because I'm trying to get as many people to shed those handcuffs, because if you do that and you can become the person that is capable of achieving the things that you want to achieve, it's a lot easier to go become whatever that is. You want to be an astronaut, you want to be an engineer, you want to have a baking business, whatever that is having the courage to start. And I think not many people do. And that's why mediocrity is something that is so pervasive, because people don't want to start. You're not that way because we're here talking, and I know how many things you do, Annika, but this message is so important. And I hope your audience who listens takes heed of that, right? Take off the handcuffs. You don't have to wear them. It's a choice.
Yeah. This is just reminding me of so many conversations I've had with mid-career professionals who say, I've done all I can. There might be some layoffs. I also know that I want to have more meaning in my life, that I just don't know how to do it. And it can be really hard if you don't have that right person. On the other hand, I've been talking to a ton of corporate people who've been in corporate world for their whole careers, but they have very mission-driven and social impact-driven organizations. So they still get to find that meaning and participate in meaningful ways and bring some new innovations and new programs and projects into their corporate world. But I'm going to segue totally awkwardly here into, you mentioned writing, you mentioned books. You co-wrote a book with 50 Cent, who's now very much known for documentaries and for saying, you know what, I knew this about that person. I knew this about that person. Here's the documentary. Here are the receipts. So what was that experience like? And how did you get involved in writing? And how did
50 Cent has no reason to do a documentary about me because I'm just a corporate guy, as that try to help people become their best selves. But the book with 50 Cent was a very interesting story. This happened literally while I was still in the Army. And during the time, let me go all the way back. When I went to Virginia Tech undergrad, I thought to myself, I was going to be like James Cameron, who was the director of Avatar, and they go to Hollywood and, make some big movies and things like that. I recognized very early on when I took my first cinematography class that sort of the technical nature of cinematography and planning and all that stuff is like, yeah, this is not for you. You need a lot more structure. That's why engineering was beneficial for me. So during that time when I was in school, I wrote like 3 or 4 screenplays that I thought were going to be phenomenal movies. Long story short, I fizzled out of cinematography and communications and film very quickly and went back into something that was more in my lane, which was business and trying to study a little bit about IT. It was a sort of a multi-interdisciplinary program called Interdisciplinary Studies, where you could choose 2 things to focus on. One was business, the other one was IT. And I had a minor in sociology because I wanted to learn about the study of group behavior, which definitely helped me in my career. But after I got out, and I was in the Army, I turned those screenplays that I wrote into stories, right? I took sort of, instead of having scenes, I made these scenes into chapters. So I was doing a lot of different research on how do you get a book deal and things like that. So Google was my friend at the time. And I didn't know that they had this whole concept of literary agents where just like you have a movie agent or you have a sports agent, they have literary agents who what they do is take, books and manuscripts and then go shop them to the large publishing houses and you get a book deal, you get an advance. Like someone who's famous like 50 Cent will get multi-million-dollar advances. Long story short, I literally sent emails to 76 different literary agents and they said, hey, here's who I am. I wrote this story. I'm an Army guy. I'm trying to get a book deal. I think it's a pretty cool story. You should read it. Most people just slammed the door on my face, didn't respond. Some people would say, yeah, not interested. But oddly enough, there's a gentleman named Mark Gerald who is still 50 Cent's literary agent to this day. And he represents folks like Eminem, I think LL Cool J, lots of different famous people that we could spout off. So I sent him the manuscript in an email. He responded and something to the effect that, look, I appreciate you reaching out, but I only represent, folks that are famous or have sold like, hundred thousands of books or things like that. So I remember that really pissed me off. So I responded and I said that, I'm going to paraphrase, but hey, I'm in Iraq right now and you're sitting in California or LA, wherever you are, with your Starbucks in your hand while I'm fighting for the freedoms that you enjoy. The least you could do is read the manuscript. Nice. And he did, right? And 5 days later, he emailed back. Yeah, 5 days later, he emailed me back. He said, you know what? The story was really good. And oddly enough, I represent 50 Cent. He's coming out with this essentially an imprint of novels, which was called Hip Hop Lit at the time. And it matched. And he's going to give you a book deal. And I said, really? Well, I'm not here. So they sent me like a big box of all this, all these CDs, Eminem CDs, 50 Cent CDs, G-Unit clothing, all to Iraq, which is crazy. So I gave all the stuff out to a bunch of the folks that I was serving with, some of the best friends that I still have to this day. During that time, I thought I was in G-Unit. I was never in G-Unit, but it felt cool to be able to do that. So I got back from Iraq and I went to New York, sat at 50 Cent's office taking a photo. This is before selfies was even a thing, like in his office, all his awards inside of his office. He wasn't there. I think he was on tour at the time, but spent a lot of time just hanging out with people. A good friend of mine named Ace that worked for G-Unit, and that's how it happened. So it was really cool to be able to say you co-wrote a book with 50 Cent because he's absolutely one of my mentors. And I mean that if I walked down the street and passed him today, you probably wouldn't know who I am, but I'm okay with that because he's so relentless and I sort of model some of my behavior and some of the things that he has written because he has had so many different acts and he's still relevant. And I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. And was that the start of deciding to write other books? Like your 500 pounds?
Yeah, the topic of that book certainly was not, it was sort of, again, like a movie type of thing. You would have something that was going to resonate with, sort of a hip hop or entertainment audience. But I always wanted to do something that had a bit more teeth in terms of how can I help someone become the person that they need to be successful. So, the second book, Your Brain Weighs 500 Pounds, we can get into the title and all that, was all about what are the repeatable habits, the repeatable methodologies that folks need to pay attention to succeed in whatever it is that they want to do. Because every day we're bombarded with so much useless information. Think how much time people waste on, your TikTok and Instagram and social media. If you thought about your mind being a body, like, how disastrous the day-to-day things the news, just think about all the terrible things that we're hearing every day. If it was a body, it would weigh 500 pounds. So that was sort of the genesis of why I called it that and how I wrote it. Was over 2 years, well, about 19 months or so, I journaled every single day. So I would listen to podcasts, I would read books, I read like crazy, just interviews, speech, talks with mentors and folks that have sponsored me along the way. And I wrote every single one of those things down. And after 18 months, I had 100 chapters and I turned those into essentially recipes because the book is all putting yourself on a brain diet or a mental diet. And really, when you read the book, it's about a couple themes that just, that come through is just embracing failure, just being disciplined, courage, and recognizes that failure is something that you should run toward, not from, right? But, since we were kids, if you fail, you get an F on a test. Now you've got to go sit in the corner and your parents are upset. And, I have 2 kids. I just don't raise my kids that way. I tell them if they're not failing every single day, then something's wrong. Because when you fail, you're putting so many different tools in your toolbox of what not to do. But it's still important for you to go try new things, right? Get out there, have that courage. And really, the book is about, it reinforces these key themes in different ways to help you become a person that is ready to go attack the day every single day and be, not feel bad when life punches you in the face, because life will punch you in the face, but just accept that and keep going. So that's really the theme of the book.
Yeah. Fantastic. And when did that book come out, and what has that done for you in your life? Have you been doing podcasts? Have you been coaching people besides your day job?
The book came out on November 14th of 2023. So it's just been a year. And the book has done exactly what I intended it to do, which was give me a platform, or a wedge, as I like to call it, to be able to start conversations on how I could help folks. So now I speak at universities, I speak at Fortune 500 companies large and small, actually. And I basically, what I do is, since there's 100 different recipes or chapters that have a discrete message you can take from it, I basically look at the audience and see what will resonate with them and take 2 or 3 of those. And then that's what I focus in on. So it's such a large amount. It's a voluminous amount of information that's there. And it's not all from my brain. These are things that, I've learned from other folks. I learned from mentors. I learned from podcasts, similar to something like yours, right? There's a podcast, I think one of your previous guests that you've had on your podcast that I've already taken notes on, and that will be in the next book, because it is something that I think we should democratize in terms of, if this is going to help you become a higher performer, let's give everyone the chance to do so. But you have to want to, you got to want to, right? A lot of people say, yeah, I want to be in the C-suite, or I want to do this or that. And if there's no meat behind it, if there's no action behind it, those handcuffs that we talked about earlier today are going to continue to be on. So, the book is something that you can read incredibly quickly. You can read it on the flight, but it has helped me kind of get in front of different audiences, which allows me to talk about personal resilience, talk about discipline, talk about the courage to go, talk about not being sabotaged socially, to talk about how ambition is something that is good, talking about how you should learn like your life depends on it, right? Because the folks that learn every single day, folks that read every single day, there's some stats out there that, folks that read at least 7 books a year are 20 times more likely to be a millionaire. So these are things that we can all do. The information is free, but are you going to take it upon yourself to actually do something and make a move? So it has done. I think it's a pretty good book. On Amazon, it hit bestseller status a couple different times. Decent amount of reviews. Most of them are positive. Some of them are negative, but I like the negative ones too. Right? This one.
That's part of growing. That's part of learning. And also, there are a lot of people who like to say things on the internet, like to hide behind that, shield. But I appreciate the fact that you talked about failing. That's not really failing. It's just a lesson to be learned. You talked about being, persevering. You talked about mental toughness and like fortitude and like having that inquisitive mind and saying yes to things, being willing to walk away from things that aren't serving you.
Yes.
These are really great things for everybody to be thinking about. Just the last episode, my last interview was along some of the same lines. It's the end of the year. We need to be thinking about, what do we want to look like, our future to look like? What are things we'll actually take action on, right? Not those New Year's resolutions that you do on, the year, but what are the things that you can think about, that you can journal, that you can write, that you can read books that will help you get in that mindset to make a change? And I think when you're in that frame of mind, it's also a lot easier not to be on social. I have people saying like, oh, did you see my, birthday thing to you on Facebook? And I'm like, oh, you know what? This is probably the first year I haven't even looked through any of those messages. I just don't care. I don't even want to be on social, because there's so many other things that are like actually feeding my brain these conversations that we have, right? That really are inspiring. And by the way, any guests of mine that have been on the show before that you want an intro to for your next book, happy to do that.
Oh, cricket. Well, Really, it should just be you, because the work that you do on a digital side is phenomenal. And, I live at the intersection of, technology and AI and service. So I think there's some things I want to mine from your brain too, to help bring forward the message. So, no, this is good. I can talk to you for another 2 hours,
Oh
but
yeah.
I
I
know
sense some co-writing coming up. So yeah, yeah.
I'm totally for that. We could take that probably a bunch of different places, but at the end of the day, what I like about your platform is that you are giving voice to others that are trying to teach lessons for folks on how to be better. And that's important, because a lot of times there are other podcasts out there, no judgment on, what space you're in when it comes to podcasting, but the podcast, it isn't about service or helping others. It's almost, it's about gossip, or it's about a spotlight on them. And I think that equation is wrong, right? I think we have gotten away from trying to do things to build one another, as opposed to being judgmental and tearing one another down. So I really appreciate what you do on your platform, Monica.
Thank you. Yeah, it's from your lips to God's ears, right? Because I do wish that more people, and I do have a good audience, but I do want more people to hear this kind of content where we're all real people, we're all normal. We have done maybe a lot in our lives, a lot of different things, but everybody can do a lot of different things. And you don't have to worry about living in a zone that you're like, this ain't it, but I'm going to sit here. And then, because that eats at you. Right. Yeah. But the things that get the big dollars are the celebrities, that are the true crime, the things that are negative. And that's just the way the world is. So we need more people like you continuing to put good out into the world. And we can do a lot of that together, hopefully. So,
yeah. Let me ask you a question, because you've been gracious with your time, and, we can talk for another hour, but I think the way these things work is very much bi-directional, right? That's how service works. So you had me on your podcast. How can I help you? Is there something that I can do to, bring some progress to you in any facet of your life? Not to put you on a spot on a podcast, but just be thinking about that, because that's important to me. That's what fires me up, because when I do that, then all of a sudden, if I do that for 2 or 3 people and they do that for 5 or 6 people, this whole idea of pay it forward becomes a real thing, and not just on pages of a book or of a movie. So not put you on the spot, but be thinking about it. I would love to help you out any way that I can.
Thank you. Well, there's definitely some things we'll be talking about. But one thing I can think of immediately is ratings, reviews, shares, subscribing to the podcast, following it, asking other people to leave a rating review, to just even listen to one episode and leave a review. Those things really help. And, the algorithms are always changing. So sometimes you see like, oh, I have so many reviews and ratings, and then something happens and they're like, oh, you don't get to see them from other countries now, or, whatever the algorithm decides to do that day. So the more people who can say positive things, the more I can get these messages out. So
totally. Oh, you can count on that. 2 shameless plugs. Obviously, the book on habits, Your Brain Weighs 500 Pounds. That's something that you can get at Barnes and Noble, Amazon, you name it. But something else
through your website, is that a source of truth?
Yeah, and it's 500poundmedia.com. You can see a lot about myself and some of the other veterans and teammates that I work with. But we are kicking off our project in 25, where we're making a documentary around resilience, especially in the time of digital. So we don't even have a title for it yet, but I think I can feel my spirit that you being a guest on that documentary to talk about your journey and what you've done in digital and how you had to make your pivots in life. I think that could be a very rich interview. So
thank you. I'm honored.
Put you on a spot. Hopefully you will volunteer to be on the documentary.
I volunteer to be
Perfect.
True. Derrick, you and I, of course, we have a lot of other conversations to be had about other parts of our lives, things that we do that are, you have a daughter who's passionate about tennis. I worked for a nonprofit educational foundation. So I know we're going to be continuing this conversation, but to end this episode, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, family motto, verse, poem, just words that help you thrive every day?
Sure. Peter Drucker, he's one of my favorite folks in history, and he says that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I've really taken that to heart, because it doesn't matter if you can have $1 trillion strategy. Or the best, most thoughtful strategy that it is, if you're in a group that the culture is toxic, the strategy is going to be worthless, right? So be mindful of who you're around, be mindful about the type of environments and conditions that you create, not only for your family, but also professionally, because whatever that strategy is, whatever you're trying to go accomplish is, if the culture is low performing, or if the culture is mediocre, or if the culture is toxic, it's going to be a big fat failure. Not to say failure is bad, but we don't want to fail. We want to take failure in, do a retrospective, and keep going. So Peter Drucker is definitely my guy when it comes to a quote.
Love that. Thank you for having this amazing conversation, giving us some energy and some things to think about. I know that I'm coming away feeling excited. So I hope everybody else is too. And we will absolutely link to your website in the show notes. And with that, happy holidays. I'll see you again, my friend, soon. And also to the audience, thank you for watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform. Do leave a rating review. And I hope that Derrick has inspired you as much as he inspired me today. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.